Hey guys, this is Joseph from AustralianChess, and today I'll be going through the first 10 puzzles that I posted on my Instagram and Facebook pages. If you haven't seen these puzzles before, I'll give you the opportunity to pause the video when I get up to the puzzle, and then you can have a look and see if you can find the answer before I go through the solutions. So here's the first position. I'll give you a few seconds to pause it if you want to have a look. Alright, so when I look at a position like this, there's a couple of things that I notice. One thing is that the rook is facing the king. Another thing is that the bishop is cutting off the king here. So, the first move that I look at is going to be rook takes pawn here. Since the king is cut off, it does force the king to take the rook. Now in this case, are there any follow-up checks? This is the only check that I see. There is also bishop here and bishop here, but both of them the rook can take. And considering we've already sacrificed a rook, makes sense to get another piece in the game, especially considering this bishop is already playing a role here. So we'll give this check. Again, the king can't go back because of the bishop, so king has to come forward. But now it's a bit tricky because there's no actual good checks. If we move our queen anywhere in, then the king can just take it. If we move our bishop in, then the king can just take that too. So you might get up to this point in the calculation and kind of end the line there. But there is a key idea here. So notice we have a rook here, and if the queen is not here, then the rook can come over. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to play this very attractive looking move, queen h4. Now, the first thing that you can notice is if the king doesn't accept the sacrifice, if the king moves over, then queen f2 will be checkmate because the bishop is guarding the queen, and the king can't go either of these squares because of the pawn on f5. So, king has to take the queen. And this is obviously the main move. Why would you not take a queen if the queen is offered to you? However, we have this rook check, but we don't want to play it just yet, because then the king can just go back, and then what have we gained? We've just sacrificed the queen for nothing. So first, we give this very cute looking move, bishop to f2. White has two replies, but against both replies, our reply is going to be the same, and there's going to be to swing the rook over and deliver a fatal blow. So for example, if pawn push, rook over, queen blocks is the only move. Notice the king doesn't have any escape squares, so queen blocks, and then checkmate. The other line is very similar. King can come up, rook comes over, queen blocks is the only move, and again, rook takes is checkmate. So I hope you enjoyed that first puzzle. It was a bit tough, probably the hardest one that we're going to do today. Let's move on to the next puzzle. So again, I'll give you a few seconds to have a look at it. Okay. So, the first thing I noticed in this puzzle is that bishop is lined up against the king. That means that bishop takes pawn could be an option. If we have a look at that, bishop takes pawn, king takes, but then there's no real good follow-up. Yes, we can get our queen into play, but king moves back, and then we only really have the queen in the attack. So that's not the solution. Another thing I notice is that this pawn is undefended. The reason why it's undefended is because, let's say we capture that pawn, then black cannot recapture this way because of the pin. Also, if we can imagine that our queen jumps from here to h6, then the king will have to move over, and then queen takes g7 will be checkmate. So, once you notice that h6 is undefended, and if a queen comes here, then it's going to be checkmate, and you also notice that this rook is undefended, then the move becomes a bit more clear. Queen b6, attacking both the rook and the pawn. Let's say that black defends the rook, then we come over as planned, it's check, only one move, king has to move over. Again, we can't take this pawn, Lichess doesn't allow it because of the bishop. So king has to move over, queen takes g7 is checkmate. And again, if black defends this pawn, let's say, I don't know, let's say king moves up. Now if queen takes pawn, king can take, and black is winning. But now the rook is hanging. So, nice little puzzle there. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, in this position, again we have a bishop along the long diagonal. Black's pawn structure around the king is very, very shaky. So my eyes are immediately drawn to this, and I'm looking for ways in which I can get another piece into the attack. Often you need more than one piece in the attack. Here you've got a bishop. The pawn is helping, but the bishop is really the main attacker at the moment. Really, we need one more piece to join. So I'm looking for a way to get the knight in. Now, we can play one of these moves. That would be a pretty good move, but we can also jump forward with a tempo. And what does that mean? It means that we're moving forward, we're moving closer to the king, but simultaneously we're attacking the black queen. So once we move forward here, the queen will have to move somewhere. And then we can look at options where the knight can deliver a blow. So let's just have a look. Let's just assume we go here for the first move. And then the queen maybe drops back. Now we have two options. Both of these are check. Which one is stronger? Let's have a look. If we go knight here, then forces king over, and then bishop takes here is actually checkmate. And if we go knight here, king over, we have a knight discovery, but pawn blocks and black survives for now. So it means this is the strongest move, because this leads to checkmate. So given all of this, black actually does have some options where to move their black queen. If black can guard this square, then they're not going to get checkmated. So if we have a look, where can the black queen move so that it guards this square? There's really only one square available for that, and that's here on e4. So this move is forced. Now, if white goes here, trying to do the same line, black can just take the knight. However, now we'll look at the other move we were looking at before, and that's knight takes f6. Now, king moves, and yes, we have a discovery, but that's not the point of this move. The point is we can take the queen now. So, again, nice little puzzle. Basically, white is going to win. Is going to win the game. The only way that black can avoid losing the game immediately is by giving up their queen by playing queen e4. Alright, on to the next one. So, in this puzzle, I notice that white has a very strong attack and is going to play queen takes b7 checkmate if black doesn't do something quick about it. However, black also has a bit of an attack going on, where three pieces are coming in, closing in on white's position. White's pawns are very solid though, so we need to figure out a way to either crash through or break up the pawns in a way. So first thing that I look at is potential checks. Queen here, they're both checks, but they don't do much because the king just takes and there's no real follow-up. However, rook takes here is a very appealing check because it's very forcing. White only has two replies. Let's have a look at them. So, rook takes pawn. If king doesn't accept the sacrifice, then we can play rook here, and that's actually checkmate because the queen guards the rook. And of course, if white does take the sacrifice, then we've opened up the file for the rook. And now the rook and the queen are both eyeing that square. Remember at the start I mentioned that g2 was not guarded, and if the queen swooped in at the start, then the king could just take. Now the difference is there's no pawn on g3, so the rook is guarding g2, which means queen g2 is actually a checkmate. So this position, it's actually just made in two. Starting with rook takes h4. Alright, puzzle number 5. This one's a bit more complicated, so feel free to pause the video and take a look. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this position, but there's really only a few key pieces that I want to point out. And if you've seen this tactic before, you might recognize it. So these three pieces are the ones that I want to point out. There's a lot of different things going on. I mean, there's a knight fork going on here. Black's queen is somehow right in white's camp. And then white could also take a bishop. So there's a lot going on, but these three pieces are the ones I want to point out. And the reason why I want to point them out, this bishop on h2 is a long way away from the action, but it's slicing all the way across the position and into black's camp right next to black's king. And there's very crucial detail, because what that means is that black can't go to these squares if black's king is checked. Also, I want to point out this rook, it's guarding this square here. So at the moment, black can't actually move anywhere. Again, the dark squares, they're covered by the bishop on h2. Even though the bishop is a long way away, it's still guarding these squares. And similarly, the rook is a long way away, but still guarding these squares. This square here. So black king can't move anywhere. What does this mean? Well, we look at checks. One check is queen takes c6. Now, it's a ridiculous looking check, isn't it? Can the king move? No, king can't move here because of the bishop. King can't move here because of the rook and because of the queen as well. So obviously black would take the queen. But now we look at the other piece. This bishop can come in now, and this is another check. And remember what I was saying before. These squares are all guarded, which means the king can't move. King can't move here, king can't move here. Now the bishop is cutting off this square and giving check. What does that mean? It's checkmate. So there's a cute little pattern where the queen sacrifices herself, pawn takes, and when the pawn takes, this diagonal is opened up and the light square bishop can come swooping in. So answer to this puzzle, queen takes pawn, pawn takes, and then bishop a6, checkmate. Next puzzle. Alright, white's got a very strong position here, but I think he's down a couple of minor pieces. Black's king is definitely a bit out in the open here. One thing I notice is that the queen is pinning the pawn to the king, which makes this pawn undefended. So white can give a check with either of these rooks, or white can give a check with the pawn, or white can take here with the idea of moving the bishop away, and then this rook will be giving check. So let's have a look at these options. Let's look at this one first. Rook takes pawn, forces king over, and then we can move the rook somewhere. Let's say we move it here, and then that opens up the discovery of the bishop. So then the king moves over, and then we can give a check, but we're kind of losing momentum here. So let's have a look at the other lands first. We can always come back to this land a bit later if we want to explore it a bit further. But first I'll have a look at the other lands to see if there's something immediate. So let's have a look at rook takes this way. Again, the king moves over, it's the only square it can go to. And let's say we move this way. And then the king comes here. And again, it's a well, actually in this case we can go rook here. And that would be a checkmate, but there is something quicker. And that move is what's going on here? That move is rook h5 immediately. And the reason why I'm getting my lines mixed up here. In rook h5 here, the king can actually come back. So let's actually go back to the start and try and think about this. So basically, whatever rook we take with, the king has to go here, and then after that we want a rook to go here, opening up the eyes of the bishop, protecting this square, and then we also want a rook to be on this line so that the king can't go here. So how are we going to accomplish all of that? I think we need this rook to go on h5, because this rook needs to stay here to guard this line. So first of all, we'll go rook here, king comes over, and then rook h5. And that is the quickest way to checkmate the king, and is the solution to this puzzle. Alright, puzzle number 7. So again, we have another situation where the bishop is on h2 and is eyeing up the king in from long distance. The king can't go anywhere at the moment, and we want to we'll have a look if there's any checkmates. And that is a bit it's not the most comfortable in this square. Obviously it's under attack from the pawn, but there's no really good squares that we can jump to. We'd love to get our knight over to a6, but unfortunately we can't go to c5 because then we just get taken. However, if we move the rook, then that's going to be a check. So if we move here hoping that the king moves over here, then we can take the queen and we win the game. However, if we take here, then the king can take, and then we just lose the game. So that's not the solution. Notice, however, if we move the rook one way, then the king is under attack. King has to move. Rook is guarding here, so king has to move over here. And then let's just say we give a check again. Notice the knight, which was a bit awkward initially on e6, is actually playing a pivotal role here. And what that means is the king actually has to go back to this square, and then it's going to be under fire again from the bishop. So then we can move the rook again. King has to come back over, and then rook check. Again, the king can't go here because of the knight. King has to go back. And what we're doing is we're just essentially clearing the whole rank, the whole 7th row, until we can get to this square here. The reason why we want this square is so that we can take the rook next. Then after we take the rook, we're going to take the queen. And that is the solution to this puzzle. So, I hope that makes sense. You might need to watch that again if it didn't make a whole lot of sense, but I hope it's clear. Cool. Next puzzle. And again, I'm just pausing for a few seconds here just to allow you time to pause the video if you want to have a look at the puzzle before I reveal the solution. So for this puzzle, black is up a rook, and it looks like black's position is quite strong. It's got this annoying thorn over here. This rook is very active. However, our knights are potentially strong. Let's first have a look at checks. This is a check, forces king over. We've got one check here, we've got one check here. But they both look, at first glance perhaps, they first look a bit innocuous, ineffective. They don't do anything. If I move here, black just takes. If I move here, black just takes. What have we achieved? But if we look a bit closer, we'll notice in this line, black's back rank is now clear. The guardian of the back rank was this rook. This rook has moved up one square. Now our rook can invade. And since this guardian is no longer on the back rank, black is actually in deep trouble. The only move is to move the rook back, and then we've got checkmate. So, I think this is a nice example of a puzzle where white's position seems okay, but it doesn't seem like there should be an immediate knockout. But here, there is a nice little resource that takes advantage of a couple of things. Firstly, we give a check. The king can't move anywhere. And it forces black to remove the guardian of the back rank. And then we can swoop in. Cool. Puzzle 9. This one's a little bit tricky. So there's a fair bit going on here. We've got bishop lining up. Got rook attacking a knight. Got some pawn tension here. Pawn can also move forward. Black has pretty active pieces, but so does white. And it's a pretty open board, which means there's a fair bit of opportunity. Not opportunity, sorry. I mean options. There's quite a bit going on here. So we need to kind of wade through all the options and try and find the clearest, or find black's weaknesses and find how we can strike there. So if we have a look at the position, if we imagine our queen jumps from e2 to h7, then that's actually a checkmate. So this is obviously a very serious threat if we can line our queen up on that diagonal, because then black will have to react to that checkmate. The other thing that I notice is that this rook is actually undefended in the corner. Often, black's rooks on the back rank are going to be defending each other, but in this case, this rook is actually just alone. So, how can we tie in those two ideas together? This rook is undefended in this square. If we can get our queen to attack that square, then we're in good shape. So, what's the key square that lines up those two squares? It's a square in e4. If we can get our queen on e4, attacking the rook and attacking h7, then we're going to be winning at least a rook, or we're going to be giving checkmate. The problem is there's a knight here. So if we play queen here immediately, then we're not actually threatening the rook, we're just going to be attacking the knight. And black has plenty of defense on that knight, so we need to do something first in order to remove the knight. How can you remove a knight? You attack it with a pawn. So the solution to this puzzle is actually pawn push first. The knight has to move somewhere. If the knight doesn't move, then we just take the knight and we win a piece. So let's say the knight moves forward. Doesn't really matter where it moves because our move is going to be the same. And that is the move that I mentioned before. Queen e4, attacking the rook on a8 and also h7. So let's say black moves the rook, then we've got checkmate. And if black defends the checkmate, then we can take the rook. So that's the solution to that puzzle. And finally, puzzle 10. So it seems like a fairly standard position here. Both white and black have got two pieces out. White's a little bit ahead in development, the queen's out. But black's position is okay. The one weakness in black's position is that this bishop is a bit offsides. It's attacked once and defended once, which means if I take it, they will take back, and no one has won any material. However, if I put one more attacker on this piece, then I can win that piece. So how can I put one more attacker on that piece with a tempo? Now, imagine my queen is here, and imagine there's no knight here, and imagine there's no pawn here. There's a lot to imagine, but bear with me for now. Then the queen would be attacking the king, and the queen would also be attacking the bishop. And in that case, the king would have to move, or the check would have to be deflected somehow, and then the queen can take the bishop, and then we win the piece. However, in this scenario, of course, if we move the queen here, if we move the queen here immediately, then of course the knight is still here and the pawn is still here. How do we remove the knight? How do we remove the pawn? Similarly to last puzzle, the first move of this puzzle is going to be kicking the knight away. So let's just say for argument's sake that the knight moves to a protected square. Not a great move, but let's just put it there for now because it's a protected square. Then we go ahead with our plan. We give a check and we attack the bishop. So now let's say knight comes back. Queen is still guarding the bishop, but that's okay. We take the bishop. We can trade, but then white is off a piece. Excuse me. And if, for example, that black moves here, be more active, and now it guards this diagonal here. We still have the same idea, and now instead of winning the bishop here, we can win the knight. So I think this is a key tactic to keep in the back of your mind. It's one that I like to use a lot. This queen check and then taking a piece if that piece is undefended. So that's the first 10 puzzles that I posted on my Instagram and my Facebook page. If you want to see more puzzles like this and attempt them yourself, feel free to follow me on Instagram at AustralianChess or Facebook. It's a Facebook page called AustralianChess. Feel free to follow me on either of those. And I hope to continue to post the solutions to all my puzzles. So hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.